Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Choosing the Right Product Strategy for Growth. Thanks for joining us. My name is Daniel, and I'm the owner of Creative Product Managers Group. Today, we have two awesome guests presenting. I'd like to introduce you Mike Belsito and Tami Reiss. Mike is co-founder at Product Collective, which organizes industry, the product conference, one of the largest product management summits anywhere in the world. Tami is a product strategy leader with over 15 years of experience. Currently,
15,
she's
not 50, just to be
SVP.
clear, everybody.
Oh, 15. Sorry. Sorry, my asset.
Don't want to age myself too bad.
Okay. Currently, she is SVP of Product and CPO in residence at Product UX Labs. So in this live Q&A session, Mike Belsito will interview Tami Reiss. Let's welcome Mike and Tami, and thanks a lot for joining us today.
Thanks for having us, Daniel. Really appreciate it. And I'm excited to be here. Actually, this is my first time using Crowdcast in a while. I used to use Crowdcast a lot, so I'm familiar with it a little bit, but it's good to see everybody. I'm from Cleveland, Ohio. That's where I'm at right now. And Ken, where are you tuning in from today?
I'm currently in sunny Miami, Florida. This is my view.
Oh, wow. That is a pretty awesome view. Nice
but
flex there,
people
Tami.
from Brazil are used to views like that, so.
Well, I know there's a chat, there's a Q&A, so in the chat, maybe share where you're from. It's always fun seeing where people are from, especially when it's all around the world like we are. So I'd love to see that. I know that, I'm gonna open up in a little bit with questions for Tami. We have a topic, it's choosing the right strategy for growth, which is actually the exact topic of a half-day workshop that's coming up with Tami next week. Or I should say in a couple weeks, not quite next week, but in a couple weeks. There's a Q&A section there. So it says ask a question. If you have questions that you want me to ask Tami, just go ahead and load it up in the ask a question section. I should be able to see those as they come in, and I'd love to get to your questions as well. So I do have a laundry list of questions though, so I'll probably start with some of mine. And I'm looking at the chat. I see people from Salt Lake City, Utah. I see Dublin, Ireland, the European home of industry. That's where we have Industry Europe every spring. I saw Cleveland, Ohio, so nice to see somebody else from Cleveland, but there's also more from Brazil, Amsterdam, India. So it's great to see people from all over the world that are here. And Tami, again, thanks so much for taking the time to do this. I think this will be a lot of fun.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Well, let's get started because I know I want to make sure that we spend a lot of time on the topic, which we have a good amount of time today. We'll have a lot of time, obviously, for your workshop, basically a half day. But for today, maybe we could just sort of go back to the basics. The title of this is like choosing the right product strategy for growth. But I have been in some places where product strategy means one thing, and I'm at another company and product strategy meant something else totally altogether different. I'm curious your take on what is product strategy? Maybe we could start to define it first.
Yeah, I think that's something that we encounter a lot because what our perspective on what product strategy is often not what a company is using the term for. Very often when people hear the word strategy, they hear plan. And we are very adamant that a strategy is not a plan, right? A plan is something that helps you accomplish your strategy. And so what we like to say about product strategy is that it's a system of achievable goals that work together to accomplish the mission and vision of an organization. Right? The mission and vision represent where you're going. The strategy is the cohesive theme of initiatives that will help you get there. Right? So you can have product strategy and you have a sales strategy and a marketing strategy, and all those strategies together have lots of plans that make them happen. And together those strategies fuel growth for an organization in the direction it's going to help accomplish its mission and vision. So if you're okay, I'm going to actually share our vision and mission statement as an example, because Products Labs recently went through a revisioning. So with Products Labs, our mission is to foster the growth and development of the next generation of product managers and leaders, right? Mission is that large not going to happen for another 10, 15 years thing, but something that you always have at the core of what you're doing. And then our vision is a little longer. And it is that Products Labs is a 3-pronged solutions to all things product management. Level up your teams with Product Institute, which is our online course. Transition the executive into the executive territory with the CPO Accelerator, something we're launching, and bring in Products Lab consultancy to transform your product organization. And our strategy right now, right? So how are we going to accomplish that mission? What's our short-term theme? Is that we're trying to provide experiences to serve the product community where they are, right? And so part of that is taking part in things like that. Part of that is the online workshops. And each of those are little pieces that are part of this overarching strategy to meet people where they are. And that's a strategy we're deploying in general, but definitely got put up a little higher thanks to COVID, right?
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of people have had shifts in their strategy thanks to market needs.
We sure had some shifts in product strategy at Product Collective too. I mean, we're in the business of producing live conferences, live workshops. So yeah, we have had to alter that strategy too, thanks to market needs.
Probably hasn't changed, right? Your mission of serving product managers who are looking for opportunities to grow, who are looking for opportunities to learn. I don't actually know what your precise mission is, but I assume it's something along for that, right? And to serve those, right? You're like, okay, I still want to serve my users. How can I serve them now that things have changed? And how can my strategy shift, right? And the strategy isn't all the little things that you're doing, right? It's not, the strategy isn't turning industry into a virtual conference, right? The strategy is we're going to move things to a virtual space to meet people where they are. One of the tactics you're doing is making industry virtual.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, and we've always, not that this is the strategy for us, but just in terms of like overall mission, like we've always said, we exist to answer the question that product people ask, am I doing this right? You know, all the people that are confused, because that was us, that was me especially. And so, yeah, we're still answering that question, but in a much different way. Yeah, well, I appreciate that. I think that's a great place to start. I am curious, you know, you mentioned a lot of people when they talk strategy, they're really talking about planning. Why do you think people get so tripped up? Like what makes people sort of confuse the two?
I mean, I think it's the first time they probably heard it in a company, right? Like, what's our strategy for this? And people show them a project plan, right? Like, this is our strategy. Here's our Gantt charts. And it's like, that's not a strategy, right? That's a plan. And I think too often that's happened in companies. And so many of us have grown up in companies that are like that we think, oh, that's what a strategy is. It's a checklist of things I'm going to do and then you actually have to build a strategy because you advance your career and you're in a more executive capacity or more leadership capacity. And someone asks you to build a strategy and you're like, okay, so checklist. And they're like, no, we need you to choose our next direction. What's the next big thing that's going to move us forward? What's the theme that you can then deploy to everybody who reports to you so that they can make little checklists and plans, right?
Yeah.
And so that shift is pretty common, and I think it has to do with exposure, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. And by the way, I know Daniel mentioned in the chat, yeah, if you have questions for Tami, feel free to put them in the ask a question section. And I think, Dan, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I'll be able to see those too. If not, Daniel can sort of feed them to me. So I want to make sure I'm asking your questions to Tami as well.
Yeah, we're here for you.
You know, I am, exactly. We're here to serve you where you are, right?
This is what Michael and I do all day long, is we serve product people with great information.
I love it. I love it. One of the things you brought up was the fact that so somebody needs to have right strategy in place too. And it reminded me, I was talking with a product leader, actually somebody else that has spoken at our conference before, Gibson Biddle.
Yeah. And
he was, sharing the old Netflix product strategy. And I remember one of the attendees at industry saying like, oh, that was so awesome because, in our business, like I'm thinking like I might be able to implement that same sort of strategy. And I remember thinking to myself, that could be good, but that could be terribly wrong too. Like, I don't know if that's right for your business. I want to ask you, how important is it to not just have this awesome strategy? Because for Netflix, that's the strategy he talked about. That was the right one, right? But how important is it to have the right one? And that might be totally different for, one correct strategy at one company could be the complete wrong strategy for another. So I'm just curious about that.
I mean, even if you think about Netflix, like, do we, I don't know who else is on here, but does anyone else remember the backlash that happened when they like stopped shipping DVDs and they had like the online only membership, which is now all anyone orders from Netflix. But there was this like moment where they're like, we're making this bet, right? Our strategy is to really shift everyone towards online only. And people freaked out. It worked out in the end for them, but there was a moment of strife there. And so if you choose the incorrect strategy, that moment of strife could actually be your demise, right? So Netflix was lucky enough that like they had researched their bets well enough to do that. And so when we talk about strategies or strategic intents, there are dozens of strategies out there. And I remember years ago, I spoke at a conference, the Lean Agile conference in Scotland, and a few of the people from Spotify were there. And they were talking about how Spotify does product development, software development. And I couldn't go to their talk because I was actually speaking. We were at the same time. And I said, so guys, what did I miss? And they said, pretty much we told them what we do. And we also told them to stop copying us, to figure out what works for you. That like, this is what works for us. It may not work for you. Figure out what works for you. And I was like, that's fantastic, right? And that's the same thing for strategy like you're talking about with Netflix. Simply because it worked for Netflix doesn't mean it's the right thing for you. And choosing the right strategy is feast or famine, right? And so when we counted up all of the strategies out there, we got to 16. We did a lot of research, we talked to a lot of people, we got to 16. And in reality, there's probably more than 16 because most companies are going to combine 2 or 3 of those at the same time. And that theoretically is a new strategy, you know, like freemium used to be like a thing, but I wouldn't actually call that a strategy. But it's a pricing model. But it's crucial you choose the right one. And the things that I think are the pieces that allow you to know, will your strategy have a probability of success, right? Nothing is ever 100% guaranteed, right? But these are things that'll build your probability of success. Is number one, understanding your current state. You have to know who you are, who your users are, where you are in serving them, how many of their problems have you solved, what does the market landscape look like? You got to know who you are and where you are, right? That's step one. You can't know where you're going until you know where, right? And then you have your current team, right? Are the right people there to execute on this thing, right? Do you have the right resources and people there to go there in that direction, right? Do you need to raise another round of capital? Do you need to hire somebody who's really good at social media marketing? Do you need to invest in a sales team? Do you need to expand your development teams to include people who understand machine learning and natural language processing? I don't know, but it's important to make sure that you don't just choose a strategy and be like, well, we were headed that way, and not think, do we have everybody that we need and all the resources otherwise to get there? Right. So that's number 2. And then number 3 is, how do you deploy it? Right. So often we work with companies that have great strategies, right? That have this great idea of like where they're headed, and they are horrible at deploying it. They don't invest the time in making sure that those team members I just mentioned understand where they're trying to go. Like, where is the company trying to go? And the more people you can have that are aware and aligned to your strategy and thinking about how their actions will help improve the success of that, the higher your potential for success is, the higher your potential for reaching that desired outcome is, right? Because the more people you have heading in the right direction, the better. And so those are the things that I think, it's not just about choosing the right one, it's also about deploying it and making sure you have the resources to make it happen. Yeah,
execution can be everything in some situations, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Probably every situation.
Ideas are a dime a dozen. Executing them is what makes millionaires, or something like that, you know?
That's right.
So, yeah.
Well, I know earlier I asked if people could submit some questions. So I want to reward positive behavior. We've got some questions, so might as well take some now. One of the questions, there's an upvote on this. So I'll start with this one. It was, what's the value of finding a strategy independent from a mission or a plan? What's the danger of just developing a plan? You mentioned how sometimes people confuse the two. Like, what if people just created the plan, but they didn't go through and actually create true strategy? Like, what could go wrong?
Well, it's not necessarily what could go wrong, but what's going to go right, right? If your plan doesn't have a direction that's going to help the company, will it help the company? Right? Like, you might be really successful in executing that plan and develop something brand new. But if that doesn't actually help the company move forward, maybe it belongs someplace else, right? And so what's the value of defining a strategy independent from a mission or a plan? I guess that question's a little odd to me. Maybe I'm not fully understanding it, Richard. But I think you're asking, like, why would you have a strategy that isn't the same time you're doing your mission and vision? So your mission and vision is something you revisit much less frequently. You're probably revisiting your strategy on an annual or a quarterly basis, whereas your mission you're going to establish maybe once a decade, and your vision every 3 to 5 years, because hopefully you're progressing towards it and you might want to change it a little bit. And so that's why you're doing it independently, because the mission and vision you've done. And now it's time to say, okay, how much closer are we to accomplishing our vision? Great. What's our next step, right? What Melissa likes to call target condition, right? And how can we set a strategic intent to get there, right? And so that's what you're doing. And you could develop a plan for something. It just doesn't necessarily belong in that company.
Yeah. Yeah, and you might be able to execute that plan really, really well, but then there's no benefit. There might not be a benefit to your company, right?
Yeah, and then
well, that's great.
Or defunded, which is no fun.
Right, that's right. More questions are coming in. That's great. I want to go to one more that I had kind of for you, Tami, in mind, which was, I'm just wondering if you might be able to think of an example where, and it could be a company that everybody might be familiar with. It could be a company that you want to keep anonymous, whatever it might be. The company that you chose the wrong product strategy, and like what could have been a better way? What could have been a better alternative?
So the first thing that came to mind to me was Google Plus. I was just like, this is a failed product, right? I also I'm like one of the TAs of a product strategy course over at Kellogg, their online like executive education program. And this was something that came up recently in one of the discussion groups. Like, can someone give me an example of a failed product? And I was like, Google Plus, right? Like, Google in general, great things. And in order to prep for today, I actually looked up the Google mission and vision, right? Google's mission is organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. So you might say that Google Plus was about social information. Their vision is to provide an important service to the world, instantly delivering relevant information on virtually any topic. And so the strategy of going into a new product line is a strategy, establishing a new product line. It can be complementary, it can be ancillary, it can be totally unrelated. I would say that Google Plus was a little too unrelated, and they didn't understand their users well enough. They weren't solving a problem the users were having at that point, and they didn't have an idea of their competitive differentiation or value props, right? And it eventually shut down. And I think that they would have probably done a lot better if they were like, okay, how do we just improve GChat on Gmail, right? Like, something people were using and no longer use.
Yeah.
Because Slack has killed that. But like, how do you make that more indispensable, right? And instead they were like, let's try something totally new, which is a strategy, but it wasn't the right strategy for them. So that's the one I'm going to go with.
Yeah, I don't know even if you know this, Tami. We have our podcast, Rocket Ship FM. Our last season was all around product failures, and we highlighted Google Plus. And so if any of you are podcast fans, you could look up rocketship.fm. Probably just Google Rocket Ship FM product failures. What's that?
talked about my personal failures with Mike.
Oh, yeah, that's right. That's right. We did. Yeah, because you were part of the season. No, yeah. That's right. Exactly.
Yeah. I have failures.
Crazy. It's funny.
Bottom line, I had failures.
I have had plenty of failures. Actually, the very first episode, we're talking about our own personal failures, my co-host and I. So
very cool.
That episode would have been like 10 hours long. But anyway, so I want to go, I'm going to take another audience question here. We've got some coming in here. Let's see here. Okay. So maybe we're getting a little ahead of ourselves, maybe not, but somebody talks about how do you go about selecting which metrics to monitor to gauge if you're actually succeeding in your strategy? Like, how do we measure whether the strategy is working or not? What's your take on that?
I think that part of when you're establishing your strategic intent is to say, like, to write a lean hypothesis that says, like, we will know we're successful when this happens, right? When we are monitoring this metric and it moves, right? Because in reality, you're setting a strategic intent for some sort of growth or other improvement, right? So if you're saying, hey, we're trying to grow our company and we think by launching a new product line, we'll be able to generate new revenue, new kinds of users, whatever, or we're attacking a new vertical and this is what's going to happen, you should say by X time, right? Give it a time frame. Like by X time, we expect this number of customers or this number of prospect inquiries if you're more of a B2B company. We expect the conversion rate to be this percentage by this period, right? And so the monitor metrics should always be attached to whatever the strategy is. Very often, the strategies have to do with what we think of as like 3 big buckets when it comes to big, large strategies for a company. They're either a way of getting new logos, a way of improving retention, or a way of improving profitability, which is also a nice way of saying like decreasing costs, or increasing operational effectiveness. But really it's about decreasing costs. And so when we go through the 16 strategies, we actually have each of them tagged as to whether or not they help with one or multiple of those options. There's only one strategy that I think hits all 3, and I forget which one it is, but I know that I had to build the graphic with 3 check marks. And so it exists. But generally what happens is part of looking at where you currently are, right? That was step 1. You say, hey, we've stalled our growth, or we're having some issues with retention, or we're really not profitable. We're bringing in all these people where our costs are out of control. And then you have to set a strategy to make that better, right? And so you've chosen a direction, and then you say, okay, what strategies can help us make that better? Not what plans, but what's general large themes of strategies. And then you can build plans around that to execute on that strategic intent. I hope that was helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think it's helpful. And you know, you referenced a couple times that 16 different strategies, at least that you've identified, which is awesome. And by the way, everybody, stick around. At the very end of this conversation, we're going to talk a little bit more about the workshop that we have coming up with Tami, where she'll spend basically half a day on those exact 16 different product strategies, and there's going to be a way that you can save. Yeah. On that workshop. So we're going to talk about that.
But like what conditions your company would be in that would warrant you choosing that strategy. And if you choose that strategy, how do you set yourself up for success? Right? Because I've been part of companies that attempted to go down market. Like, so when you're thinking strategies, you might be thinking, oh, going up or down market. Those are 2 out of the 16. Congratulations. You're 1/8 of the way there. But I've been part of companies that went down market and did it poorly. I've been part of companies that went up market and didn't prepare properly, didn't think about their team when they're like, oh yeah, we're sure our product can totally be sold to the enterprise. And they don't think about security, and they don't think about how their product needs to change when it comes to user roles, because all of a sudden the enterprise wants user roles, right? I noticed there's a B2B SaaS question out there. Like, I spend my life in B2B SaaS product management, and the enterprise is very different than the mid-market. And so understanding those differences as you're thinking about going up or down market, and understanding the different needs, like the SMB on the other side really needs easy to use setup stuff. They don't need the thousands of different configurations that the enterprise has requested and beaten down your door to add to your backlog. They just need it to be easy to use. And so how do you adapt your product for that, right? Because the strategy is we're going down market. Right? But so how does your marketing, how does your product change? How does your engineering change? How does packaging change? How does sales change? All of those things if you choose to do that. And those are the sorts of things we go over in the workshop, because simply saying, oh, we're going to go down market isn't like flipping a switch, right? And neither are any of the rest of the strategies. So that's something. Oh, Mike's audio is dying, but I'm just going to keep talking while Mike does that. So one of the other strategies that's part of the 16 that a lot of people forget about is sunsetting a product, right? So we mentioned Google Plus. At some point, they had to shut it down. This gets more into the strategies around cost cutting and becoming profitable. Like if you're investing resources in something that isn't developing the results you need, and you have other products out there that could use those people and those resources to develop more money for you, it's okay to shut things down sometimes or to sell it off. So I was part of City Grid Media, which is like the old City Search and a variety of other things. And at some point, we bought a company called Felix. And Yext may be something you know about. I don't know. They've IPO'd, B2B software, very big success story. Yext is an online management tool for businesses to make sure that all the places where they're listed have the correct information. So like the reason why you can find a UPS store and its correct address is because of Yext, right? They maintain all of the correct addresses for UPS store around the world, around the country, I guess. And they have DHL and otherwise for those of you who are international as clients. But at some point, they also had a technology called Felix, which allowed for companies to track like inbound phone calls based on online advertisement. And Yext realized that was not core to their business and it wasn't core to their growth. And they said, can we sell this to somebody else who could use it? And City Grid Media, who was doing local media for doctors and veterinarians, and it turns out Felix was really big with tow shops because people searched immediately, like, and they could track that the phone call went through, right? Because you're going to call the tow shop from the side of the road. That technology was much better suited for the local businesses that Yext was no longer serving, because Yext was serving these larger enterprise businesses and like address and I think they called it like identity management or I forget what their exact title for it was. But by selling off or sunsetting something, you actually open up your own resources to be dedicated to where you should be going and what will really fuel your growth. And that's something that a lot of people forget about. And so when we talk about the 16 strategies, the way we think about them isn't that you're going to implement all 16 strategies. That's wrong, right? What we like to use it as is a checklist. Like if you're a product leader and you're thinking, hey, I want to grow, read through all 16 and say, did I explore all my options, right? Or did I just really get excited about the first thing that came to mind or the thing that everyone keeps telling me about, as opposed to evaluating like, where am I trying to go? And what are my resources to get there, right? Well, do I have the right team to even execute on that? And then looking through the 16 and saying, actually, that one might be better for me. I should partner, right? To make this happen. I should become a platform, or I shouldn't become a platform, or whatever one of the strategies makes the most sense to you. But look through the 16 just so that you even take this step back to say, oh yeah, I explored my options. And this is the one that made sense. Are we back, Mike? Can you talk now? No, we can't hear you. It's okay. Well, you'll come back eventually. You can keep trying. Just try interrupting me at some point. I'm gonna read one of the questions. Okay, so to what extent do you communicate product strategy with customers, such as for B2B SaaS? So if you're in a B2B SaaS company, you may or may not have some sort of customer conference once a year where your key customers, key partners, et cetera, come to a hotel or conference center in Vegas or California where they get to go golfing. And that often is the place where you share maybe your upcoming roadmap. I don't think you as much share your product strategy. So the product strategy is more that which directs the things you might tell customers or the kinds of customers you're going to be looking towards. But you may say to an existing customer, so like for instance, Gainsight is an insight company that we partner with on a few different things. So Gainsight recently acquired another company. So Gainsight was a tool that did customer success metrics. And they said, you know what we can do? We want to expand into product metrics as well. So they could have built a product metrics tool. Instead, they decided to acquire one, right? And now, so that was like strategy was we would like to expand into serving a new vertical, the product people within a company. And so what I would say is that at some sort of conference, they might have said to their customers, hey, we're expanding our functionality and our capabilities to serve you and your company more, right? We're going to also be serving your product people. And this is how we're going to be serving it. You're currently muted according to your little icon, Mike. So maybe that was the problem. But
can you hear me now, Elise?
Oh yeah, hi.
Okay. I think I needed to just refresh it for some reason. Just start for the issues, everybody.
And Sandy, I totally agree with you that I agree. Strategy should always align with the company vision and mission. If you'd like a job, I'm not hiring soon, but maybe one day soon.
Tami, I did have a question, and thank you for taking that. That was actually the audience question I was going to pull next too.
Oh no, I was like,
perfect.
okay, this one has 2 upvotes. I'm going to go with the 2 upvotes.
I love it. You don't need me. What am I here for, really? No, the other question I was going to ask you is just where you see, particularly when people, maybe they have the objective in mind and they're choosing their strategy, what mistakes do you often see? I mean, is it simply choosing the wrong strategy, or are there other mistakes that people sort of make in the process? Just curious about that.
Well, I think one of the things that often happens is people forget to monitor. So people forget to set up that metric for what they think is success and monitor towards it. So I think that's a big one. And then the other thing I think is big is that people choose their strategy, whichever one of the 16 is they're going for, and they don't test it, right? You have existing customers, you have prospects that are on your list, you have the ability to set up a landing page or do a Wizard of Oz or anything else you learned about in Lean, and deploy that as part of testing that this is the correct strategy for you. And too often companies say, okay, this is the strategy, and we presented it to the board, and the board said, okay, and this is what we're going for. And they forget to say along the way, in that monitoring sense, is this the right thing, right? As we tested it with this target group of customers that we thought we'd be serving, it turns out our value prop didn't resonate to them. It didn't resonate with them. And so that nature of the importance of testing often gets lost, because people think, especially when they're working on their second or third product within a company, we talk about this a lot, you don't have the DNA of the startup anymore, right? You've already reached product market fit, and the people who you've hired now aren't necessarily the people who are used to experimentation and are used to wearing different hats and dealing with the uncertainty. And so if you're going to be going for a strategy of some sort of growth, and it might be up market, down market, new product vertical, et cetera, those sorts of things involve an entrepreneurial mindset and involve testing again and involve going through the lean experimentation process again so that you can execute on your strategy successfully. And I think those are the 2 biggest things that get missed.
Thanks for that. I appreciate that. Going back to another audience question, somebody had asked, what if you choose a strategy, it's working well for now, for the current stage of growth you're in, but you know that to really achieve long-term growth, you're going to need to change the strategy. How do you communicate that to others within your organization, other stakeholders? Because really, they might look at it and say, but it's working. Why would we be changing course right now? So I thought it was an interesting question. I wanted to run that by you.
I mean, that comes back to the Netflix, right? We're no longer going to ship DVDs, or we're going to have a separate product that's got no DVDs associated with it at all. And so there were probably lots of Netflix employees who didn't necessarily buy into that. And I think that it gets back to a strategy that's aligned with the mission and vision, right? You have to go back and say, our company's mission is this. Our vision is this. Our current strategy was to do this to accomplish that vision, to get us closer to that vision. We see some success there. We believe this new strategy will bring us even closer, even faster, right? And because you have to draw it back to that, right? If you're changing your whole vision, whole other situation. But if you're simply pivoting your strategy and saying, hey, we've got a little bit of traction with this, but not enough. We think if we deploy this other thing, it'll be more. But again, this gets back to the testing we just mentioned. Don't change your strategy entirely without some testing involved, right? Be able to say to somebody, we validated this strategy in this way, right? We did this amount of market research. We had this landing page up, and it had off the charts numbers, right? And that helps people say, oh, well, that sounds really exciting, right? And so when you are shifting, you have to be able to take people along with you. And if you have your strategy aligned to the mission and vision, which we talked about is integral, you remind them of that and how this strategy is helping you do that. But then you also bring up data, right? Hey, we tested it. This is what we learned. This is why we believe in this strategy. This is why we're reallocating people. This is why we're reallocating the marketing budget. This is why we're shifting salespeople like this, And the hardest people to convince are the salespeople. Oh man, because they're commission based. Like that's the other thing, is have empathy for your coworkers, right? Salespeople are commission based and they know how to sell something and they know how many deals they need to sign to hit their bonus and all of those things. If you change that on them, it's like taking the floor out from beneath them, right? So you have to be able to say, this is what it would look like if you did this instead, right? This is how much more money you're going to make. This is how many more of your bonuses you're going to hit by going after this, because man, are they hard to convince. And that's only really in the B2B world, because like most B2C doesn't involve very much sales, but that is a huge like stakeholder group that bringing them along is key to your success and also a really difficult challenge.
I know we just, with the time that we're in right now, I want to start talking about your workshop coming up. But what I wanted to do is maybe if you want folks that are attending now to take like one big thing away from all of this that we're talking about as far as it relates to choosing the right product strategy, like if they're going to remember one thing out of this entire webinar sort of today, what would you want that one thing to be?
I would say that your strategy isn't a plan, and it has to be aligned to your mission and vision. Like if I hadn't said it enough and thanked, I think it was Susan who said it. Yeah, like that's Sandy, not Susan. Yeah, that would be the number one thing I would say to you, is that like, do not deploy a strategy that you cannot connect to your vision for where you want your company to go. Because it'll be harder to get stakeholders involved. It'll be harder to bring your team along for it. It'll be harder to explain to the market. It'll be harder to explain to your customers. Like people have a brand recognition of you do something, it's probably related to your mission and vision. If you go too far away from that, I can't even begin to say like how poor my predictions for success are. I'm not saying it couldn't happen that you would be successful, but probability would not be in your favor.
I think that's good. I think
no, there's this example. And I believe you that there is an example. There may even be a dozen examples, but they are few and far between.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's a great takeaway for everybody. Well, I know, so your workshop, you have a virtually half-day workshop. It's going to be June 30th. It's coming up. What can attendees expect from it? And I'm going to, in a little while, I'm going to share my screen and share a little bit, but it's still just sort of for conversation, me and you. Like, what can attendees expect from that?
I mean, first of all, they can expect to learn about all 16, right? And they can learn about not only like what they are and other companies that have deployed it successfully, and we'll probably give you a few examples for each one of them. So you can have a good impression about what that meant, but also really deep diving into what's the foundation that leads to that strategy being a solid one for choice to choose, and what you can do to, if you choose that, to make it successful. And then we'll go through different examples with real companies and we'll say, okay, if you're Facebook and you're trying out this strategy, right? What do you need to make sure was there, right? What are you going to do to ensure success, right? If you're Uber and you're thinking about this as part of your vision that you're not currently accomplishing, which of these strategies do you think would be the best to choose, right? And we'll go through examples like that. So it won't just be me lecturing at you, because that's never fun for workshops. It's going to be a lot of you using your brain and then hearing from other people what they thought, right? Because the truth of the matter is, as much as we've just talked about correct and incorrect strategies, there's probably 2 or 3 that could help you accomplish your goal, right? It's a matter of dedication and deployment to that, right? But choosing one of those 2 or 3 out of the 16 is step 1, right? Testing between those 2 or 3 to say, oh, this is actually what's resonating with our customers or our market, right? That's where the science comes in, right? But what I want the group of people who will be part of this workshop to be able to do is hear that like one group in a breakout session might have chosen one and they have a good case for why that one is what they think is correct. And another group might choose something else, which is the whole part of the list of the 16, to realize simply because you chose one to begin with doesn't mean that there aren't 15 or so other options that could also accomplish the goal, right? And so thinking through that with the team and learning about that. And then the last thing is going to be part of presenting to your peers in the workshop is going to be helping you learn how to present it to your executives, right? So if you're like, hey, I think we should be doing this, It's part of you knowing how to build the case for why should we be choosing this strategy, as well as what do we need to do? What do we need to plan to execute on that strategy, right? And so those are the things that you'll get out of the workshop.
That's great. And, one of the things you just mentioned, which I want to kind of call out, you said, you'll be presenting to your peers. This is kind of to clear up, even if somebody hasn't participated in a true virtual workshop before, this isn't like just a webinar where you're, typing your questions. This is interactive, just as interactive as it would be if it was in person. Could you maybe speak to sort of like the interactivity of workshops that you do, even virtually?
Yeah. So I think that, something we do is like pretty much like every 5th or 6th slide, there's like some sort of activity that you do, and we'll have breakout groups, like the joy of breakout rooms. And you'll be able to discuss it with your peers, and then you come back and you present it. And it's like 10, 15 minutes at a time, but we really like to break it up, right? We love to have Q&A, right? So if at any point while I'm talking, you have a question similar to what we're doing right now, like, the importance is that you gain the knowledge, not that I lose my voice, right? Like, that's not the objective of the workshop. The objective of the workshop is that you walk away and you say, wow, I really learned something. I'm going to do this tomorrow. I'm going to research this metric tomorrow. I'm going to look at the current strategy we have and make sure we're monitoring it, right? Those are the things I want you to walk away from, and to know how to monitor it or how to reallocate resources so that your strategy is more successful. Right? How do you take a step back and say, I just realized the strategy we have doesn't actually align to our mission or vision, right? How can we adapt it to make sure it is, or how do we change or pivot, right? How do I talk to my coworkers when I'm talking about a strategy that shows that I have empathy for their situation and also gets them excited and brings them along? So those are the sorts of things, but it's definitely much more interactive, right? Like, it's every 15, 20 minutes, you're taking a break, you're talking to different people, you're getting to know different people, different perspectives, but they're also intimate, right? So like right now, there were like 200 people who signed up for this. How many, like, there's a limited number of tickets of like 15 or so people, right, Mike?
Yeah.
Like 20 people?
That's right.
So
and that's intentional. I mean, we want to make sure that interactivity is there for everybody so that you can learn from your peers. Well, like, we're seeing everybody's faces during these workshops. So it's a lot different than, this conversation we're having here, although this is great.
If you can't fit on a Zoom gallery view, it's not a workshop, right? Like, if I have to scan over, something went wrong.
That's right. No, and I think that's kind of the biggest surprise, maybe, since you've been doing workshops for a very long time. For us at Industry,
we do a lot of in-person ones.
Yeah, like the virtual has been new for us. And when for some of our attendees, they said, well, this was my first time participating in a virtual workshop. I didn't realize how interactive it was going to be. It's almost maybe even more interactive than some of the in-person ones we've had, because for our in-person ones, we've had 40, 50 people, but we especially limited these, since this is so new for us, just to sort of foster that interactivity. So I think that's one thing that sort of stood out to me.
Yeah. I mean, and you'll probably get a template or two to help you like create a product strategy canvas, things like that, things that exist in the build trap, but we have ready and for you all, and you'll learn how to fill it out again and again, right? And so we want to help you build that muscle memory. And when we do a webinar, you can't do that, right? Because I can't provide feedback on what you and your team have put together. But in a workshop, we break out, you present, and then not only are you getting feedback from your peers, you're also getting feedback from me. Like, what would I say if you were a CPO I was working with, or a VP of product I was working with, or a CEO I was working with? I was thinking about choosing that strategy and thinking about how to deploy that strategy and thinking about how to execute on that strategy. Like, what would I say to you? And that's normally like a $500 an hour benefit. So you're getting a bargain.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. And by the way, I want to point out to everybody, you'll see this green button at the bottom. That's a link right to the workshop page. So that'll take you to the workshop page. You could learn more there. You'll notice, though, there's a code, Creative PM. When you use that code, you're going to save over $40 on the workshop. So that code is good through the end of this week. So that is a little time sensitive, but there's something else that this is sort of new. I sort of made the call on this earlier this morning, and I'm gonna try to share my screen. Although with the audio issues, yeah, let me just see if this will let me see here. Okay, I think it's gonna let me. All right, so I'm gonna go back to my Can everybody see can you see my screen, Tami?
I can.
Okay. So this is the workshop, right? So you'll save $42 when you use that code CreativePM. But this is my little sort of bonus that I'm adding. We have our virtual conference coming up. Tammy's one of the speakers at the virtual conference coming up. It's Industry Virtual in September. And there's different types of passes that you could have, but the tickets start at $125. Well, actually, it's $150 is the day of show rate, but right now, since we're still in early bird mode, it's $125, and $225 is the conference plus pass. But that $125 that gets you access to all the live sessions. There's also an exclusive rocket ship mini season that we don't release on our live feed. There's all sorts of stuff, and there's other speakers like Jason Fried of Basecamp. They actually just launched a whole new email service called Hey this week, which is getting a lot of attention. There's Julie Zhu, who's the author of Making of a Manager. She used to be VP of Product Design at Facebook. So what I added in is if you register today, and I'm not going to time it, you don't have to do it within the hour, but say by the end of the day, give you to midnight, I'll actually, when I see that purchase come in, I'm going to kick in a free main conference pass to Industry Virtual, that's like another extra $125 is what it would be if you bought the ticket right now. So you end up saving really a whole lot. You get the free conference pass. You're going to save $40 on the workshop. So yeah, I just thought, you know what, let's give it a shot. And I add that in. So hopefully y'all can join us for Industry Virtual and not only take in Tammy's input on everything through the workshop, then you'll get to hear her present alongside all the other speakers at Industry Virtual too. So
and in Industry Virtual, I'm not talking about product strategy at all. I'm actually talking about how you manage your product team like a product, and how you can deploy strategy things on that. So I talk about other things.
I'm sorry, I'm in the matrix now. I'm trying to get back
to the matrix.
Not share.
We talk about a variety of things, and Product Labs has a realm of things that we do, and we're really excited to partner with Product Collective on this workshop. On my boss Melissa has talked at Industry, and I'm excited to talk at Industry this year, even if I don't get to stand on the stage that the Beatles once stood on. It's my dream for next year, Mike. I'm putting in a wish list.
I know. Well, and that is for everybody's perspective. Usually, Industry's in-person conference, right? We hold this every year in Cleveland, Ohio, and the state. It's at Cleveland Public Auditorium, which is this historic auditorium in Cleveland. And like Tami said, that's the stage where the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, Duke Ellington, like so many historic people perform there.
May we all live in a world that is more safe in a year or so.
Yes, that is the plan. We'll be back. The in-person edition scheduled for October 2021. I would like to think we'll be able to get together in October 21, but I guess we'll just have to see. But for now, we're going to get together virtually. At least you could be, in your own home, probably on a comfortable couch, taking part in Industry Virtual.
But as Mike and I said, like, attending a conference is like you turn it on, it's in the background, maybe you start paying attention, maybe not. But the workshop is interactive, right? Like, we're not going to give you homework at the end of it, but like, we hope to engage you, right? We hope that you are there, you're taking part, you're talking with other people, you're playing with the templates, and you're really like building the muscle memory, as I like to say, that is more than simply listening to a podcast or attending a webinar like this, right? It's much more about deep diving into your learning and your learning objectives in a way that you don't get through other things.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun too. I mean, as you could tell, Tammy's high energy. We're already learning a lot. We're going to learn even more. So yeah, I hope y'all can join us for that. But I hope that the session has been helpful too. Again, we don't have time in an hour to cover 16 different product strategies and where they fit best with which business objectives. But sometimes it's good to at least take a step back and just try to understand, hey, are we thinking about strategy in the right mindset to begin with? And I hope that that's what a lot of people got out of today's session with.
Cool.
Well, Daniel, I'm going to try to come back here and see if I can close my, there we go.
Can we ask one last question that got upvotes?
Yeah, let's see where did we, yeah, I'm getting back into the questions here.
Who should be involved in creating the strategy? I think anybody in a leadership position, but also anybody who wants to be involved in creating the strategy, right? Who has good ideas, right? I think the best companies are built where everyone's idea can surface to the top if it's quality. And then the other one was, should product follow strategy or strategy evolve with product, which usually follows customer problems. And so I think that I lie in the realm of, you establish a strategy based on what you know about your current, which is understanding your current customer problems, their journey, which parts of it you aren't solving, which parts of it you already are solving. Are there new customers whose problem you want to solve, et cetera? That's where strategy comes in, right? Are we expanding the number of problems we're solving for a customer, or the number of customers we're solving problems for? Those are the most common strategy questions. And then once that strategy is set, products should follow suit and make roadmaps, et cetera, that follow the, are we expanding our customers or the number of problems? And so that's how I would answer that question. They are intertwined.
Well, thank you. By the way, I mean, yeah, we have a couple more minutes. If there's any last minute questions for Tami.
Can I just add one thing here? The only way to use that is data. You have to know more about your customer needs and understand how you're currently serving them by looking at your product metrics, by looking at your usage, by talking to your customers, right? Like, that's where all of the lean development, customer development, all that stuff falls in to helping know which strategy to choose. Right? So that's how they're intertwined. But yeah.
That's awesome. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm going to let it, again, we have a few minutes left. If there's any last minute questions for Tami on product strategy, on anything we talked about on the workshop that's coming up, feel free to ask it. Daniel, if you wanted to come back on to say any final words too, feel free to pop back in. I assume you are pulling the string, so you could probably pop back in whenever you'd like. But I mean, this has been a lot of fun for me. I'm just glad that we got to spend the time and do this together.
I love talking with you. I hope actually maybe Daniel has a question. Daniel, do you have a question?
Daniel should be able to ask a question if he has it. This is his show.
Okay, sorry guys.
No.
Well, no, it's great, Tami. I think everything was covered. We have. I just wanna. I have a question. Yes, about acquisition. It's about my company. I have a company here in Brazil. It's a B2B SaaS, and we have some issues regarding acquisition and product. And so, how can I hold currently the product. I'm responsible for the product, and I have a lot of contact with sales team. And how can I handle this? How can I improve offering a better offer, a better product to help the acquisition? I mean, sometimes I cannot communicate better with the sales team. So any tip, anything that I can do from my side that help you?
I think the first step is to say, I don't know, right? I don't know, is the offering poor or is its positioning poor right now, right? Is acquisition a problem because the product itself doesn't meet the needs? Or is acquisition a problem because the marketing isn't showing them how the product meets their needs, right? So start by saying, I don't know, and run experiments that help you understand that, right? Like, is the product, like, show the product to customers, have them play around with it, right? See how they might use it, ask them what would happen if you took it away, things like that. And then also try to iterate, like ask the sales team or the sales enablement team if they're open to iterating, right? Or if you can work with the marketing people on iterating some of the product messaging, right? To say, does everyone understand what our product does, who it's targeted at, right? Are they even targeting the right people, right? Product builds with a user in mind. Is sales talking to that user, right? Is sales positioning it in a way that resonates with that user? And so I would say at the moment, I don't know, and come to it with a place of humility and say, I want to understand this better. Because if the answer is, I'm not meeting enough customer needs and I need to develop a feature or two, I'm happy to do it. If the issue is we're hitting up the wrong customers, let's fix that. If the issue is our marketing funnel isn't drawing in the right customers, let's fix that, right? So knowing that you don't know what you want to fix yet is that stepping back. And then you can say, okay, our strategy is to change this part, right? But, and that's just like a strategy for fixing something. The larger strategy is still like, you're serving your customer's need, right? And as long as that is cohesive, you'll probably be in a better place, right? And making sure that everyone understands that and what their need is, right? And how you solve it.
Oh, great. Thank you.
So I would just start there.
Okay.
I don't know.
I love that. And Daniel, I think that should absolutely be every one of these. You should, for your own company, get to ask any question you want, right? These should at least help. That's how we started Product Collective. We were talking about that yesterday, Daniel, right? Like, I just wanted to learn from other people. So it's like the selfish benefit for me is I get to now learn from some of the best product people. I love that.
And I enjoy teaching, so. And this is much more efficient to me than having to go into the GA classroom in New York City. So much more accessible right now also. Cool. Well, I'm trying to, how do we explain? Yeah, I think the other questions, like, my email is Tami, Tami @Products Labs. I hope you join us for the workshop. I'll be able to answer a lot more questions there. I think what Mike's doing by offering you a free ticket is super awesome, because industry conference is just this amazing opportunity to learn from so many leaders across the product world. It's like the bargain of the century to buy a ticket right now to this. Don't tell anyone else.
Well, thank you, Tami. No, I hope to see everybody there. It'll be fun.
Cool. Well, I thank you, Daniel, for having us. This has been super fun. Thanks for Mike for asking great questions.
Yes. And thank you, Daniel. And thanks everybody for being here. This was a lot of fun for us, and hopefully everybody learned something from it. So we really appreciate it.
Thank you, Tami. Thank you, Mike. I really appreciate it as well. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
We hope that the people who watch this at home when it isn't live also get to enjoy it, right? You published this also somewhere for people who couldn't join live?
Yeah, they can join. It's recorded.
Awesome. Great. Sounds like fun.
Yeah.
We should just say that today was Thursday, June 18th. So Mike's offer expires at midnight-ish, June 18th, 2020, if you're watching this as a recording. It's all about the legal disclaimer, right?
That's right. Exactly. All right. Well, thanks again, Daniel. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Have a great day. Thanks so much, Daniel.
Thank you. Bye-bye.